Hello again and welcome to another episode of Pragmatic Electric. It's been a while between drinks, but that's okay. Something amazing happened in 2023, at least in Australia anyway, so far as electric vehicle charging infrastructure goes. And I was so blown away with how far it's come. I just wanted to do a quick post about it. One of the things that has been a growing issue in Australia is obviously electric cars are becoming more and more popular. And that's not an issue, but without the charging infrastructure to support it, it becomes a problem. And so one of the things that I've done is did a bit of research over the last approximately 12 months, a bit of a loose cutoff at November of 2022, and had a count of all the different chargers that have been installed in Queensland specifically. In that time, it's actually quite an impressive number when you consider what the EV population's actually done in growth. Just talking about the growth figures for a second. In 2022, there were about 5,200 BEV, battery electric vehicle sales. In 2021, it was up to 17,200. And then in 2022, 33,400. And then finally, and most recently, this year to date, final figures, because this is being recorded on the 31st of December, 2023, we're currently sitting about 80,500. That's sales in Australia of all BEVs. Now that's pretty impressive. That's certainly decent figures. That leads to a total estimated, and this is obviously based on a combination of sales figures, registrations, vehicle lifetimes, somewhere between 175 to 180,000 electric cars on the road. Now for Australia, those are reasonable numbers. And if you're wondering in terms of percentages, that works out at about 7.5% of all sales of electric cars in, that was Q3 of this year. So July, September. So that is a significant growing number, not quite cracking the 10%, but certainly it's not the small numbers that there used to be. So now electric cars really do need that infrastructure to support them. So Tesla have been absolutely knocking it out of the park in terms of installing superchargers. And when Tesla installs superchargers, they are in and out very, very quickly. Like honestly, it was that they will turn around a site in 11 days. It's an insane amount of time just to show up, plonk everything down, wire it all up, and have it operational in 11 days. A lot of the other manufacturers, other players in town, people like Jolt, Amp Charge, BP's Pulse Network, and so on, they will take multiple weeks. QESH are phenomenal. In some cases, it took them 6 months to commission one site, which is a single stall. Tesla, on the other hand, much more efficient. So in Australia, Tesla have installed, in the last 12 months, 28 new sites. Now, I'm not including a 29th site, is basically a 2-charger skid in Coffs Harbour. That was installed to handle congestion. So that was an old charger that used to be around, I think it was in like 2015, 2016, up the top of the big banana at Coffs Harbour. Anyway, not counting that one. Otherwise, still an impressive figure. Of those, 5 of them were in Queensland. So they opened one in Roachdale, they had 6 stalls there. They installed another one at Runaway Bay, another 6 stalls. Calliope, which is one just at the crossroads between Billawheeler at Gladstone, up around on the way up to Rockhampton on the Bruce Highway, much needed on the Bruce Highway. I have an actual supercharger beyond Gympie North, which is fantastic. And of course, my hometown, Rockhampton, it has 7 stalls open there as well. These are all V3 chargers, by the way. And then finally, and most recently, Tweed Heads opened as well. 6 stalls there, though there's some controversy about the car park and not being open all hours, but never mind that. A few days ago, I dropped by North Lakes. There are 9 stalls going in there. Unfortunately, they didn't quite make the cutoff. So in total, they added 31 charging stalls, which is the better way to count it, rather than just sites, because the number of stalls per site is critically important. Because a lot of the competitors out there are only installing 1 or 2 chargers at a site. Only Tesla seem to be consistently doing larger sites. So I mentioned before V3 superchargers. The first V4 supercharger also opened in Australia this year, which is fantastic. That's on the Hume Highway. It's actually installed at Albury. So that is a massive installation I think there's 16 of them. They're V4 superchargers. For those not keeping up at home, the V2 superchargers, they had a 2-meter lead. So did the V3s, but the V3 lead was water-cooled. V4 lead is 3 meters long, and it's immersion water-cooled. So again, improvements to cooling means you can get away with more current over the same cross-sectional area. So the cables are cooler and lighter and can go for longer to overcome voltage drop, which is great. Anyone that's interested in the figures, it's 4 amps per square mil is what you get on standard copper that's not cooled on a V2 supercharger. That goes up to 13 amps per square millimeter on the V3s with standard water cooling, and an impressive 35 amps per square millimeter on the V4s. So not too bad. What's interesting though is on the V4s that they can actually go up to 615 kilowatts, charging at 1000 volt DC. Of course, there's no cars that are, and they're not enabled for that yet either. That's just the nameplate. They're currently capped at 250 kilowatts around the world, as is the one in Albury. But in future, they will clearly unlock that. But there's no vehicles in Australia that can actually do that yet. We don't have Cybertrucks and we don't have Tesla semis. Maybe someday, hopefully someday. So the V3 superchargers are basically what you've got everywhere. My Model 3 Standard Range Plus, it taps out 170 kilowatts. So you know, any 250 kilowatt charger is fine. Most 150 kilowatt chargers are fine. So V2s and upper, you know, it's not a problem for me anyway. But that's just me. One of those other little fun facts, or little tidbits if you like, is that the charging rate of the vehicle is different from the actual drivetrain voltage. So for example, this Tesla that I'm driving right now is a 400 volt architecture. Cybertruck is 800 volt. Reportedly, I'm pretty sure it is been confirmed as being that now. So in any case, but the charging infrastructure doesn't have to match that. An example, that's the Hummer EV, which has a 400 volt drivetrain, but it has an 800 volt charge. It does that by going from series to parallel for charging, which is kind of a neat trick, but still, in any case. So one of the other things that I've been keeping a close eye on is not just the Tesla superchargers, but all the others. There's actually quite a few others. You'd be surprised. In fact, in terms of counting stalls, all of the others combined far exceeded what Tesla installed in the last 12 months. So whilst I'm very impressed that Tesla's doing the rollout here of those the high capacity superchargers, I'm mostly impressed with all the others like Amp Charge, as I say before. Not so much Jolt, they've only had a handful. Amp Charge haven't done too many. Like EV in particular, and BP Pulse actually are the front runners in terms of how many stations that they've installed. It is actually quite impressive. So just talking briefly about QESH, that's the Queensland Electric Superhighway. Phases 1 and 2 were completed over a year ago, the last lot of Phase 2. So the last 12 months or so, they've been installing Phase 3. And Phase 3 was designed to get away from just the Bruce Highway, which is the north-south route from the Gold Coast or Brisbane all the way up to Cairns in the north, way up the top towards Cape York. So going west has always been a problem, and to have an efficient highway network, you really need to have EV charging points every 250 Ks or so, depending upon the range of your vehicle, of course, but ideally about every 200 Ks. So you can go between 20 to 80% efficiently at a DC fast charger at a reasonable amount of time. Unfortunately, QESH's biggest problem is that they only install single chargers, but single DC chargers. It's like one CCS Combo 2 and one CHAdeMO. They also have AC backup chargers. They've been using the tritium units, typically 50 kilowatts, sometimes 75 kilowatts for the more recent RTM 75s. But unfortunately, they're still a single car, or at a time, effectively for the majority of them, and they're not particularly reliable. They're not fixed regularly. They're not maintained properly. It really is quite frustrating. But irrespective, having DC fast chargers on all those highways is critical if we're ever going to actually get past this perception that you can't drive an EV outside of a major city. So with QESH, they actually installed 14 sites, which is pretty impressive. I mean, the list of sites is pretty good now. We've got coverage on most of the major highways. But if you have a look at the highways in Queensland, obviously there's a lot more highways than just this, but let's just pick the main 7 highways. The main 7 highways, so of course, the Bruce Highway, already mentioned, well and truly covered on phases 1 and 2. Then you got the Warrego. So the Warrego Highway heads west from Brisbane out towards Cunnamulla. Then it turns north up to Landsborough to Cloncurry, and then it turns into the Barkly Highway from there onwards into the Northern Territory. Then you've got the New England Highway, and that goes all the way from New South Wales through Toowoomba and then to Yarraman. Does a little bit of a, turns slightly across into the Dagular to get to Kingaroy, and then you're on the Burnett Highway, which goes through Gayndah, Monto, eventually ending up just south of Rockhampton. Then, of course, you got the Capricorn Highway, which is from Rockhampton all the way out to Longreach, or, well, technically Barcaldine, I suppose, but never mind that, or Barkey if you prefer. Then you got the Leichhardt Highway from Goondiwindi to Westwood, and that terminates that Westwood on the Capricorn Highway, of course. So you got the Flinders Highway from Townsville out to Cloncurry, which is the major western route from up north out to the west to Northern Territory. And then finally the Carnarvon Highway. From New South Wales, it goes from St George to Rolleston. Eventually becomes the Dawson Highway to Springsure, then the Gregory through to Charters Towers, and eventually it ends up in Mount Surprise, of all places, and Georgetown. But that's up in the Gulf, way up in the Gulf, down Normanton sort of area. So in terms of electric chargers, all those roads are effectively paved, and the major arterial road that has a bit of a gap in it is Cloncurry. So Cloncurry has no DC fast charger, which is a problem because it's the only sealed road from Queensland to the Northern Territory. The other one that really did miss out, you've got gaps on Capricorn Highway as well. So there's a gap between Emerald and Barkey that they're going to hopefully close in the coming year in 2024. So they're going to be adding Alpha, which will help a lot, and they're also going to be adding Mitchell, which is on the Warrego, and that's west of Roma. And they're finally going to add Dalby. I have no idea why on earth it took them this long to do Dalby. And then finally the Burnett Highway, which has been very underrepresented, will finally get chargers at Gomerri, Gayndah, Monto, and Billawheeler. Long overdue. So that's all coming, and those gaps are all closing. So hopefully by the end of 2024, all of the major highways around Queensland will have at least one DC fast charger at a reasonable 200-300 kilometre distance between them. So having done all this research into all the chargers that have gone online in the past 12 months, so the winner is actually Evie. Evie came in at 49 charging stalls, of which 5 of them were Chartamo. BP Pulse came in close as a second with 44, of which 7 were Chartamo. Obviously, not as many Chartamo cars, but part of the funding from the government required that they also had Chartamo plugs for Chartamo vehicles. Amp Charge added the big 6, of which half of them were Chartamo, and Jolt did 4, of which 2 were Chartamo. There's a few other odds and sods that I haven't included in that. But if you add all those up, that far exceeds the 31 stalls that Tesla installed. So it's pretty impressive between the multiple networks. But my biggest single gripe with all of these rollouts is they are predominantly focused on Southeast Queensland. Now, I mean, that's fine for me, I suppose, since I'm in Southeast Queensland. But, the reality is that there's a world outside of Southeast Queensland. And if you want to actually hit the road and go and explore outside of Southeast Queensland, you've only got a very small number of chargers. Now, I know that's going to change, and I know that Tesla next year are reportedly going to install fast chargers at either Bundaberg or Childers, one of the two, as well as Mackay. You've got EV fast chargers. They are the only other people that installed anything outside of Southeast Queensland. And high capacity 350 kilowatt chargers as well, which is great. So EV actually installed one at Proserpine. I say one, it's actually a couple of charging stalls, 350 kilowatts at Proserpine, which is in the Whitsundays. Beautiful spot too, by the way. Turn off there, go to Airlie Beach. Beautiful spot. And hop across to Hamilton Island if you're so inclined. Lovely area. But then they also did some at Toowoomba. But they're the only other company. So they've also installed some more than 2.5, I think it was 3 years ago. So actually it was 2020. They installed some 350 kilowatt chargers in Townsville. I think in Gluten, if I remember correctly, the suburb of Gluten from memory. In any case, So EV is the only other game other than Tesla that's installed anything outside of Southeast Queensland. Having said that, at least in Southeast Queensland now, it's reached the point where I could leave home without a care in the world to how much charge I had, and it would pretty much be safe for me to drive 15, 20 Ks and have a fast charger available to me, which is essentially the equivalent of a petrol car today. Anything driving and any ICE cars would have the same range backup. So if you're running low on fuel, you stop it at a petrol station. If I'm running low on charge, I stop it at a fast charger. Don't even have to worry or think about it. Of course, I'm going to lose more time than filling up a car, but then if I'm filling up an ICE car, but then again, if I'm only trying to put in 10-15%, I'll only be there for 5 or 10 minutes. That's not a problem. So ultimately, it's getting there, it's improving, and it's going to get better. It's been an amazing 12 months on the EV front in Australia, especially in Queensland, and I couldn't be happy with where it's going. It's a great time to have an electric car, and I really can't wait for the time when I can actually drive wherever I like, and all I'm surrounded by is electric cars. There's no exhaust fumes, hardly any noise. That's going to be lovely. Mind you, that's still a good ways off. Probably at least 10 to 15 years, maybe a bit longer. But we're well on the way. It's a good start. Fair way to go. Anyway, have a happy new year. See you all in 2024, which for me is just tomorrow. So I guess see you tomorrow. I don't know.